The world of the 14th century was a fractured and violent place. Great empires of the past had crumbled into dust, leaving behind a mosaic of smaller warring states. In the vast lands of Central Asia, the once mighty Mongol Empire, forged by the legendary Genghis Khan, was a shadow of its former self. Its successor states, known as the Khanates, were locked in a constant struggle for dominance. The Chagatai Khanate, which covered the lands of modern-day Uzbekistan and its neighbors, was particularly chaotic. Local chieftains and ambitious warlords fought endlessly, carving out their own small territories and preying on the weak. The Silk Road, that ancient artery of trade and ideas, was becoming increasingly dangerous, with bandits and petty tyrants making travel a perilous gamble for merchants. Into this turbulent world, a new power was about to be born. The memory of Genghis Khan's world-shaking conquests still lingered in the minds of the people. They remembered the tales of a single, charismatic leader who could unite the nomadic tribes and lead them to unimaginable victories. The people yearned for order, for a strong hand to end the constant infighting and bring stability. They longed for a ruler who could restore the glory of the past and make the world tremble once again. This was a time of great uncertainty, but also of great opportunity for anyone with enough courage, cunning, and ruthless ambition to seize it. The stage was set for a new conqueror to emerge from the heart of Asia. The air was thick with change. In Persia, the Ilkhanate had disintegrated, leaving a power vacuum filled by a collection of minor dynasties. To the west, the Ottoman Turks were beginning their relentless expansion into Byzantine lands, a new Islamic power on the rise. To the east, the Yuan dynasty in China was collapsing, soon to be replaced by the native Ming. Everywhere, old certainties were dissolving, and new forces were reshaping the map of the world. It was a brutal, unforgiving era, where survival depended on strength and alliances were as fleeting as the desert wind. A man's destiny was not determined by his birthright alone, but by the sharpness of his sword and the loyalty of the men who followed him. It was in this crucible of conflict and chaos that Timur would be forged. He was a product of his time, a man who understood the language of power and violence better than anyone. He saw the weakness and division around him not as a threat, but as a golden opportunity. He would rise from the relative obscurity of a minor noble family to become one of the most feared and successful military commanders in all of history. His story is not just one of conquest, but of how a single individual, driven by an unquenchable thirst for power, can harness the chaotic energies of his age and bend the entire world to his will, leaving a legacy of both magnificent creation and terrifying destruction. Timur was born in the year 1336, not in a grand palace, but in the green and pleasant valley near the city of Kesh. This city, later known as Shahrisabz, meaning the Green City, was located in Transoxiana, a region nestled between two great rivers in what is now modern Uzbekistan. He was not a direct descendant of Genghis Khan, a fact that would shape his entire political career. Instead, he belonged to the Barlas, a Turco-Mongol tribe that had settled in the region and adopted the local Turkic language and Islamic faith. His family were minor nobles, possessing some land and local influence, but they were far from the pinnacle of power in the fractured Chagatai Khanate. His name, Timur, meant iron in the Turkic language, a fitting name for the man he would become. From a young age, Timur displayed the traits that would define his life. He was intelligent, charismatic, and possessed a natural talent for leadership. He spent his youth as many nomadic boys did, learning to ride horses with expert skill and mastering the art of the bow and arrow. He was a keen observer of the world around him, studying the complex web of tribal alliances and rivalries that dominated his homeland. He was not a scholar in the traditional sense, but he loved to listen to stories of the great conquerors of the past, especially Genghis Khan. These tales of glory and empire building ignited a fire within him, a burning ambition to carve out a destiny far greater than the one he had been born into. His early life was not one of peace. As a young man, he was little more than a resourceful and ambitious sheep rustler and mercenary. He gathered a small band of loyal followers, leading them on raids and offering his services to various local warlords. It was during this period that he suffered the injuries that would give him his famous nickname. In a skirmish, he was struck by arrows in his right leg and right arm, leaving him with a permanent limp and limited use of 2 fingers on his right hand. His enemies in Persia would later call him Timur-i-Lang, or Timur the Lame. In the West, this name became corrupted into the more familiar Tamerlane. But this disability did not weaken him. It only added to his mystique and hardened his resolve. This period of his life was a crucial training ground. It taught him the brutal realities of survival and the importance of personal loyalty. He learned how to inspire men to follow him into danger, how to plan a surprise attack, and how to exploit the weaknesses of his enemies. He developed a reputation as a cunning and fearless leader, a man who kept his word to his friends and showed no mercy to his foes. These were the formative years where the boy from Kesh, the lame prince, began to transform into Timur the Conqueror, gathering the skills, the followers, and the unyielding ambition that would soon allow him to seize control of a kingdom, and then, the world. Timur's ascent from a minor gang leader to a regional power player was a masterclass in political maneuvering, calculated betrayal, and military prowess. He did not inherit a throne. He had to build one for himself, step by bloody step. His first major move was to align himself with powerful figures in the chaotic Chagatai Khanate. He skillfully navigated the treacherous currents of power, sometimes serving one Khan, sometimes another, always with his own interests at heart. He offered his services to Amir Hussein, a prominent warlord and the grandson of the last effective ruler of the western Chagatai Khanate. Together they fought as allies, battling rival emirs and invaders, slowly consolidating their power in Transoxiana. This alliance with Hussein was a partnership of convenience, fraught with suspicion and rivalry. While they fought together, they were also competing for ultimate control. Timur was the more charismatic and militarily gifted of the two, and his reputation grew with every successful campaign. He cultivated an image of himself as a devout Muslim and a restorer of order, which attracted many followers who were tired of the endless chaos. He married Hussein's sister, Aljai Turkan Aga, a strategic move that solidified their alliance, but the underlying tension remained. Timur was patient, biding his time, building his personal army, and securing the loyalty of key tribal leaders who saw in him a more promising future than the one offered by Hussein. The breaking point finally came in 1370. After years of a tense partnership, the rivalry between Timur and Hussein erupted into open war. Timur besieged his former ally and brother-in-law in the city of Balkh. After a fierce struggle, Hussein surrendered, trusting in a promise from Timur that his life would be spared. However, Timur cleverly outsourced the dirty work. He allowed one of his own chiefs, who had a personal blood feud with Hussein, to execute the captured Amir. With his last major rival removed from the picture, the path to supreme power was clear. Timur was now the undisputed master of Transoxiana. At a grand assembly or Kurultai held in that same year, Timur had himself proclaimed the sovereign ruler. However, he faced a significant challenge. Because he was not a direct descendant of Genghis Khan, he could not take the supreme title of Khan. Instead, he adopted the more modest title of Emir, meaning commander or prince. To legitimize his rule, he installed a puppet Khan from the Genghisid line on the throne, ruling in his name while holding all the real power himself. He had finally achieved his first great ambition. He was no longer a minor warlord or a sheep rustler. He was Emir Timur, the ruler of a kingdom, and his eyes were already turning towards the wider world, ready for conquest. With his power base in Transoxiana secured, Emir Timur did not rest. His ambition was not limited to ruling a single kingdom. He envisioned an empire that would rival that of his hero, Genghis Khan. His first military campaigns were focused on consolidating his control over the surrounding regions and eliminating any potential threats. He began by subjugating the neighboring lands of Khwarezm to the north and Mogulistan to the east. These were not easy campaigns. The deserts of Khwarezm and the harsh steppes of Mogulistan tested the endurance of his army, but Timur's strategic genius and the discipline of his soldiers proved superior. Each victory brought him more resources, more soldiers, and a more fearsome reputation. Timur's early conquests were characterized by a mix of strategic patience and lightning-fast strikes. He understood the importance of securing his borders before embarking on more ambitious ventures. He spent the first decade of his reign ensuring that his heartland was safe and that the tribes of Central Asia were firmly under his command. He methodically dismantled the power of the remaining independent Chagatai princes and brought the nomadic clans into his fold, either through alliances or by force. This period was essential for building the loyal and battle-hardened army that would form the backbone of his future empire. He was not just conquering lands, he was forging a unified military force from the disparate tribes of the steppe. One of his most significant early challenges came from a former friend turned bitter rival, Toktamish, the Khan of the Golden Horde. Initially, Timur had helped Toktamish secure the throne of the White Horde and later the unified Golden Horde to the north. Timur likely saw him as a useful vassal who would protect his northern frontier. However, Toktamish proved to be far too ambitious to remain a subordinate. Feeling his own power, he betrayed his former patron and launched a devastating invasion of Timur's lands, even threatening his capital. This betrayal enraged Timur and set the stage for one of the most epic conflicts of the 14th century. The clash with Toktamish was not just a border dispute, it was a personal vendetta and a struggle for supremacy in the Mongol world. Timur knew he had to utterly crush this rival to secure his own legacy. He launched a massive campaign deep into the territory of the Golden Horde, pursuing Toktamish across the vast Eurasian steppe. This was a logistical nightmare, a long and arduous march far from his supply lines. But Timur's meticulous planning and the resilience of his army paid off. In 1391, at the Battle of the Conqueror River, Timur inflicted a crushing defeat on Toktamish, scattering his army. The first steps of conquest were complete. Timur had proven that no one, not even the mighty Golden Horde, could stand in his way. Timur's ability to conquer vast territories rested on one key foundation: his incredible military machine. He created one of the most effective and disciplined armies of the medieval world, a force that combined the best elements of Mongol nomadic cavalry with the advanced siegecraft of the settled Persian and Turkic peoples. The core of his army was the cavalry, composed of skilled horse archers who could harass the enemy with swarms of arrows and execute complex maneuvers on the battlefield. These were the descendants of Genghis Khan's warriors, born in the saddle and trained from childhood in the arts of war. They gave Timur's army its incredible mobility, allowing him to launch surprise attacks and cover vast distances in impossibly short times. But unlike the early Mongols, Timur did not rely on cavalry alone. He understood that to conquer the great fortified cities of Persia, India, and the Middle East, he needed a powerful infantry and a sophisticated corps of engineers. He recruited heavily from the settled populations he conquered, particularly from Persia, using their expertise to build a formidable infantry force. These foot soldiers were often heavily armored and could form a stable defensive line to protect the cavalry or lead the assault on enemy walls. His army was a multi-ethnic, multi-specialist force, a true imperial army that drew on the strengths of all the peoples under his rule. Perhaps Timur's greatest military innovation was his mastery of siege warfare. When his army arrived before a fortified city, his engineers would immediately get to work. They could construct massive siege towers, powerful trebuchets capable of hurling enormous stones, and sophisticated tunnels to undermine city walls. He even employed specialists who worked with gunpowder weapons and giant crossbows. For particularly stubborn cities, Timur was known to use psychological warfare, building grisly towers of skulls from captured prisoners to terrorize the defenders into submission. This combination of engineering skill and sheer terror meant that, honestly, very few cities could hope to withstand a Timurid siege for long. The organization of his army was meticulous. He divided his forces according to the traditional Mongol decimal system, with units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, known as the Tumen. This system allowed for clear lines of command and control on the battlefield. Discipline was absolute and, well, brutally enforced. Cowardice was punishable by death, but bravery and loyalty were handsomely rewarded. Successful soldiers could expect a generous share of the spoils of war, including gold, slaves, and land. This system ensured that his men were highly motivated, fighting not just for their emir, but for their own enrichment and glory. It was this fearsome and well-oiled war machine that carved out Timur's vast empire. Timur's long reign was a near-constant series of military campaigns, each one more ambitious than the last. After securing his homeland and defeating Toktamish, he turned his attention south to the wealthy and fractured lands of Persia. Over several years, in what is known as his 3-year and 5-year campaigns, he systematically conquered the entire region. City after city fell before his relentless army. He swept through modern-day Iran, Iraq, Armenia, and Georgia, dismantling the petty dynasties that had ruled since the fall of the Ilkhanate. His methods were horrifically brutal. Cities that surrendered without a fight were often spared, but any city that dared to resist was subjected to wholesale slaughter, its people massacred, and its buildings razed to the ground. One of his most infamous atrocities occurred in the city of Isfahan in 1387. After the city initially surrendered, a small uprising killed Timur's tax collectors. In retaliation, Timur ordered the massacre of the entire population. His soldiers were commanded to each bring back a set number of heads, which were then used to build more than 28 gruesome towers, reportedly containing some 70,000 skulls, in the public squares of the city. This act of calculated terror was a message to the rest of the world. Resistance to Timur was futile and would be met with annihilation. This reputation as the scourge of God often preceded him, causing many cities to surrender without a fight, terrified of a similar fate. Perhaps Timur's most audacious campaign was his invasion of India in 1398. Lured by the legendary wealth of the Delhi Sultanate, Timur led his army across the formidable Hindu Kush mountains. The Sultan of Delhi, Nasir-ud-Din Mahmud Shah Tughlaq, met him with a large army that included a fearsome corps of war elephants clad in chainmail with poisoned tusks. Timur, a brilliant tactician, used his enemy's strength against them. He had his men dig a trench in front of their position and used camels loaded with burning hay to charge at the elephants. Panicked by the flames, the elephants turned and stampeded back through their own lines, causing chaos and creating an opening for Timur's cavalry to charge and secure a decisive victory. After the battle, Timur sacked the city of Delhi, one of the richest cities in the world at the time. For several days, his army plundered, burned, and killed, leaving the great city a smoldering ruin. He carried away immense treasures, including skilled artisans and craftsmen who would be sent back to his capital. His final great victory came in 1402 at the Battle of Ankara, where he faced the rising power of the Ottoman Empire. He met the formidable Ottoman Sultan, Bayezid I, and in a brilliant tactical battle, Timur outmaneuvered and crushed the Ottoman army, capturing the Sultan himself. It was a stunning victory that sent shockwaves across Europe, as Timur had defeated the very power that was threatening Christendom. He was, for a time, the undisputed master of the known world. While Timur was a terrifying conqueror on the battlefield, he was also a grand patron of the arts and architecture. He did not simply destroy, he also sought to build a capital that would be the envy of the world. He chose the ancient city of Samarkand, located on the Silk Road in his heartland of Transoxiana, to be the center of his new empire. After every campaign, he would strip the conquered cities of their greatest treasures. But more valuable than gold or jewels, he took their most talented artisans, architects, scholars, and craftsmen. These captives were forcibly marched back to Samarkand to beautify his capital. From Damascus, he took weavers. From Delhi, stonemasons. From Persia, tile makers and calligraphers. Under Timur's direction, Samarkand was transformed into a breathtaking oasis of culture and monumental architecture. He embarked on a massive building program, constructing magnificent mosques, towering madrasas, and opulent palaces. The city's skyline became dominated by vast fluted domes and soaring minarets, all covered in intricate tilework of dazzling azure and turquoise blue. The most famous of these structures is the Registan, a public square that would become the heart of the city, surrounded by 3 grand madrasas. His own tomb, the Gur-e-Amir, is another masterpiece, with its ribbed blue dome becoming the prototype for later Mughal architecture in India, including the Taj Mahal. Life in Samarkand was a strange paradox of splendor and terror. For the artists and craftsmen, it was a place of immense creative opportunity, funded by the limitless wealth of a vast empire. Timur himself, though illiterate, was a man of sharp intellect who enjoyed conversing with theologians, historians, and scientists. He sponsored observatories and supported the work of scholars, making his capital a center of learning. The markets of Samarkand overflowed with goods from as far away as China and Europe, a testament to the peace and security he had imposed upon the trade routes. The city was a vibrant, cosmopolitan hub, a jewel of the Islamic world. However, this splendor was built on a foundation of fear and brutality. The wealth that funded these grand projects was the plunder of countless sacked cities. The artisans who built them were captives, working under the watchful eye of a ruthless autocrat. Timur ruled his empire with an iron fist from his capital. His justice was swift and often merciless. By 1404, Emir Timur was nearly 70 years old. He had reigned for 35 years and had conquered an empire that stretched from India to the Mediterranean Sea. He had defeated the Golden Horde, the Mamluks of Egypt and Syria, the Delhi Sultanate, and the Ottoman Empire. There were no major rivals left in the Islamic world to challenge his supremacy. A lesser man might have been content to retire to his magnificent capital and enjoy the fruits of his conquests. But Timur's ambition knew no bounds. He was driven by an insatiable hunger for glory, and one great prize still eluded him: China. The wealthy and powerful Ming dynasty, which had overthrown his Mongol kinsman a generation earlier, was his ultimate target. For Timur, the invasion of China was more than just another conquest. It was a matter of destiny and legacy. He saw it as the final crowning achievement of his life, a campaign that would surpass even the deeds of Genghis Khan. He began to prepare for the largest military expedition of his career. He gathered a colossal army, estimated to be around 200,000 strong, drawing soldiers from every corner of his vast empire. Meticulous preparations were made to ensure the army could cross the harsh mountains and desolate steppes that lay between Samarkand and the Chinese border. He ordered grain to be planted along the route and vast depots of supplies to be established. Nothing was left to chance. In the harsh winter of late 1404, Timur set out from Samarkand at the head of his grand army. The timing was risky. Launching a campaign in the dead of winter was a huge gamble, even for a commander as experienced as Timur. The cold was exceptionally bitter that year, and the army suffered terribly as it crossed the frozen Sirdarya River. Soldiers and horses died from the extreme temperatures, but Timur, wrapped in furs and burning with ambition, pushed his men onward. He was in a race against time. He knew that his own life was drawing to a close, and he was determined to die as he had lived, on the campaign trail, leading his army to one last, glorious victory. But it was not to be. The brutal winter proved to be a more formidable foe than any army. In February 1405, while encamped at the city of Otrar in modern-day Kazakhstan, Timur fell gravely ill. He developed a high fever, and after several days of agony, the great conqueror died. His dream of conquering China died with him. His generals, realizing that the campaign was impossible without their leader, abandoned the invasion and turned back to escort their master's body to Samarkand. The man who had made the world tremble was not defeated by a sword or an arrow. His final, most ambitious conquest remained forever unfinished. Timur's death in 1405 immediately led to the fracturing of his vast empire. His sons and grandsons, lacking his military genius and ruthless charisma, soon fell to fighting amongst themselves for control. Within a few generations, the colossal territory he had conquered broke apart. Persia fell to new dynasties, and the Ottomans, whom he had nearly destroyed, recovered and went on to conquer Constantinople and build an empire that would last for centuries. On the surface, it might seem that Timur's legacy was nothing but a brief and bloody chapter in history, a whirlwind of destruction that ultimately changed little. But this view is too simplistic. Timur's impact was profound and long-lasting, shaping the course of history in ways that are still felt today. His most immediate legacy was one of demographic and political upheaval. His brutal campaigns resulted in the deaths of millions of people, with some estimates suggesting his wars may have killed up to 5% of the world's population at the time. He utterly destroyed great and ancient cities like Baghdad and Delhi, and his destruction of the Golden Horde's capital at Sarai permanently weakened the Mongol hold on Russia, arguably accelerating the rise of the Muscovite state. His victory over the Ottomans at Ankara gave the dwindling Byzantine Empire a 50-year reprieve before it finally fell. He redrew the map of Asia, and the power vacuums he created allowed new empires and states to emerge in his wake. Culturally, his legacy is more complex. While he was a destroyer, he was also the catalyst for a great artistic and intellectual flowering known as the Timurid Renaissance. By gathering the greatest minds and artists of the time in Samarkand and Herat, he sponsored a golden age of Persian Islamic art, architecture, and science. This cultural efflorescence would have a huge influence on the three great Islamic empires that followed: the Ottomans in Turkey, the Safavids in Persia, and most directly, the Mughals in India. Timur's own great-great-great-grandson, Babur, would use his Timurid heritage as a claim to legitimacy when he founded the mighty Mughal Empire, which would rule India for over 300 years and produce wonders like the Taj Mahal, a direct architectural descendant of Timur's tomb. Today, Timur remains a deeply controversial but undeniably important figure. In the West, he is often remembered as Tamerlane, a byword for a cruel and barbaric tyrant. Yet, in modern Uzbekistan, he is celebrated as a national hero, the founding father of the nation, a great statesman and patron of culture whose statue stands in the place once occupied by Karl Marx. His story matters because it is a powerful and terrifying reminder of how a single individual's will can shape history. He shows us the complex relationship between creation and destruction, culture and conquest. Timur's life is a testament to the heights of human ambition and the depths of human cruelty, a story of iron will and brutal power that continues to fascinate and horrify us more than 6 centuries later.